Welcome, everybody. Namaste. I am so excited to have this wonderful lady with us today. And as you see, those of you who are familiar with Deep Dialogues, this is a completely new format, meaning this conversation is not a live conversation. It's a recorded conversation so that myself and my dear dialoguer on this occasion, as you can see, the wonderful Wendy Kennedy, can go really deep into the substance of what the process is all about. So we can take as much time as we need and therefore communicate to you what it is to develop a new hierarchy of values, to help us develop this brave new world that is taking place at this time in this, as we go through this extraordinary shift of consciousness. It is a deep dialogue, and so Wendy's already aware of the fact that we will be conversing on many different levels, and particularly reaching into her field of specialism, which is connecting with the Pleiadian consciousness and what that means. So you'll see that it's not a presentation, it is a dialogue, as the title suggests. And so without more ado, what I'd love to do is just to share with you who Wendy is. I have her bio before me. Wendy Kennedy is a very prominent channel and a spiritual teacher that works globally. She has used her gifts and abilities to communicate with higher dimensional beings for the past 29, 30 years. Wendy assists others in recognizing and releasing their limiting patterns and beliefs in order to create a foundation for a life filled with greater health, abundance, love, joy, etc. Wendy lectures and channels for clients around the world. She was one of the 6 channels featured in the movie and book Tuning In, Spirit Channelers in America, and is a featured guest in the docu-series interview process called Interview with Extra Dimensionals that is currently live on Gaia TV. Her work can also be found in the book The Great Human Potential, Walking in One's Own Light, which is now available in 7 languages. And you'll see that towards the end of our deep dialogue, Wendy's website will be up on the screen. So Wendy, it's so wonderful to have you here. I've respected your work over many years and seen a number of wonderful interviews that you've given to some of the celebrated people that are transmitting at this time. So most welcome for you to be here.
Oh, thank you. And it is such a joy for me to be here with you.
And actually what comes to mind is that Wendy and I, with 4 other luminaries, will be part of an extraordinary retreat in Egypt during September. And so information will be going up this week about this retreat called the Luminaries of Light. And hopefully we will be tuning into some of the remarkable references that Wendy will be making for us this evening whilst we're in sacred Egypt. So Wendy, the book, The Great Human Potential, was this the book that you wrote, or were you simply a contributor to that?
I'm a contributor to that. It was put together by Martine Vallée, and it's the works of myself and um oh my gosh, my brain is just gone. Um um Tom Kenyon. Wow.
Ah,
So it's myself and Tom Kenyon, and Martine Vallée has put this together. And so that has been 10 years, I think. It's
okay,
when that
cool.
first came out.
I must tune in because I know Tom quite well, and I've been in receipt of his work for many years. So, how fantastic.
Yeah, so it was such a joy to be able to do that with Martine. She's since passed, but she was amazing and had amazing questions for the guides and things that she wanted to kind of focus on for the book. And they talk a bit about our origins and where we're headed in the game that we're playing. And yeah, it was just such a service that she put the book together. So I was honored to be invited.
Yeah, yeah. And so Tom presumably was channeling the Hathors,
Yes.
and
Yes. So that
to a congress of dimensional beings or specifically tuning into the Pleiadian consciousness?
When I work with the public, the Pleiadians tend to take points. So for this particular work, they were the group that came through first and foremost. And I always say first and foremost because sometimes there are other beings who are showing up and kind of blending their energy with the Pleiadians, but they're kind of the gatekeepers and they tend to be front and center.
Wow, I can't wait to get into the whole nature of the way that you receive information from them. So don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't quite grab that title, it will be in all of the information to do with Wendy's bio and also her website underneath this recording. So I know you've been asked these questions 50 million times, but where did it all begin?
Oh, so, well, I'll say it began in the mid 90s. I was starting to have visions. I was in Chicago at the time and I was living in an old building and I thought maybe the visions I was having, I thought they were associated with the building I was living in. And I started doing some research on that and along the way I came across books on channeling. I didn't really know what it was at the time. I didn't know anybody who was doing it, but I felt very drawn to do it. And I can remember saying to friends at the time, I know I'm supposed to be doing this. I know it sounds insane, but I feel really called to do it. And they were incredibly supportive. They said, well, if you manage to do this, I'll be your guinea pig, I'll be your volunteer. I have lots of questions. And so it took me about a year from the time I felt that calling to really bring through information because I was trying to channel verbally. And while I would feel tingling and my eyes would flutter and water, I just couldn't get the words out. And I was doing a lot of work on myself at the time. I was studying meditation, doing a lot of inner work. And looking back now, I think my journey actually began a number of years before that. And all the things that I went through while I was in college, I was doing a lot of yoga and Alexander technique and body work. And I started having past life memories then, but I didn't really understand it. And I didn't know exactly what that meant. And looking back now, I can see how that was just kind of clearing the way and preparing me for what ultimately ended up being my life's journey. So I sat down one day. I knew I was supposed to have pen and paper and I started doing automatic writing. And that's when everything really opened up for me.
Mhm.
And, probably about 9 months after that, I was hearing things well in advance of writing it out. And the guide said, it's time to put the pen down and just speak. And once I did that, that's when the ninth dimensional Pleiadian collective came in. And they're my primary group, as I said, when I work with the public. But I actually work with a lot of different galactic beings, some angelic, some higher dimensional beings of light, but a lot of galactics.
So the automatic handwriting was a way of being able to recalibrate your consciousness to a certain frequency, presumably, and it lasted for the time that it was necessary, and then it was no longer necessary.
I'll still use it today when I write for myself because there's something very special about writing, whether you're writing for your journal or even through the channeling. It just really helps to ground the information. And if I'm channeling for myself and it's something that I'm invested in, something
Mm,
that I want to make sure I'm really clear on, then I'll do the automatic writing as opposed to just a quick check-in. Because for me, when I channel verbally or I'll say translate, I'll have a conversation, it fades very quickly. So
mhm,
I can go back and I can read the writing. Um, and it's interesting with the automatic writing. I don't know if most people could read what looks to be scribble almost, but
mm,
each of the beings has their own script, the way that it comes through. And I can tell just by looking at that it's this particular being or that particular being. And there's
mm,
also a lot of energy that's encoded in that. So I
mm.
can go back and tap back into that original conversation and all the data and all the information that was being passed through at that time. So I still do use the automatic writing when it's for myself or it's something I want to make sure I'm really clear on.
Mm. And so the writing, am I right in saying from what you've just shared with us that the writing is calligraphized, is actually holographic?
So it comes through, it's like there's no break in the words.
Yeah,
So it can be a little tricky to read for some people,
yeah,
or if they were to pick up my notebook and look at it. But I understand, especially now, it's been so long, I can easily read through it.
yeah. I was just looking at your wonderful, wonderful website and seeing the extraordinary symbology of that calligraphized form of writing. And I assumed, is this accurate, that this is Pleiadian communication through
What
the sigils?
It depends. It depends on the information. So it can change a little bit when I work with the language of light, and the written form I call call galactic light codes,
Yeah.
because it is primarily galactics that are bringing in the information.
Mm,
Because for those that aren't familiar with the language of light, it's comprised of light, sound, sacred geometry, and cosmic information. So there's a carrier wave that is encoded in there. So a lot of times when the information comes through, say beings from Sirius may come through, they're coming because they have walked the path that we're on and they're sharing their how to with us.
mhm,
So it will shift. And every month I have a group that I work with, and I create a new code for them. And it just depends on the energy who comes through. And when I do activations, when I speak the language of light, we may
mm,
rotate through 20, 30 different groups very quickly,
mhm.
because it's encoded with all this extra energy. But the language of light, I started very early on. And that was with the Arcturans. They came and they were giving me the symbols, and I was doing the automatic writing. And I put it aside when the Pleiadians came in, because the Pleiadians were waiting for me to channel verbally, because they work with tone and
Mhm.
sound. So when you hear me channel the Pleiadians, you'll think, well, why has she got a dialect? Because it's really elongated vowels that they can modulate the frequency with. And it's changed over the years. It depends on what's coming through. It used to sound way more British, and then it kind of went to this place that was a bit more Australian, and that used a whole new set of muscles in my mouth. I was like, "Oh, you guys are wearing me out." And then it's kind of come back somewhere in the middle right now, but it does change. And probably, I think it was probably around 2014, 2015, the guides came back and they said, it's time to start working with the language of light. And so we started up with the symbols again.
And the symbols were communicated through automatic handwriting?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So when we go into the entire symphony of what you've described to us, and we go to the very essence, the very pith, the very core, the quintessence of why are these extraordinary extraterrestrial, indeed ultra-terrestrial beings, because they're living beyond the terrestrial ionosphere of the Gaia. Why are they communicating to us at this time?
Well, they say they're here to remind us of our true divine nature, to help us to remember how to be stewards for the planet. That's kind of our next step, to remember that. And really, what we're going through right now in terms of this ascension process will impact the entire universe. And specifically, the compassion that we will hold as we go through this process, because Earth is a very, very challenging planet to be on. We have thousands of worlds worth of genetic material here. And along with that genetic material, we have all the emotional components of those species. So we have a wide range of emotions. And they say, if you want to go learn about emotions, go to planet Earth. That's what they call Earth, the planet of emotions. And as we're going through these challenging times, and we've already been in those dark spaces, and when we see people struggling, it allows us to tap into a level of compassion that even they say they don't have access to, because we've been there, we've done it, it's challenging, we've embodied it. And embodying it and having a sense and a knowing of it, they're two very different things. So they say that we access a level of it that is very powerful, and then that has a ripple effect throughout the entire universe.
Wow. And so their frequencies are beyond the feeling arena. They're actually experiencing interstellar light communications, which are not akin to, they understand, obviously, compassionately. But is that correct? That they're living completely in a new language sphere, which
Yes.
supersedes what we're experiencing?
Yes, and I think that's, for them, that's also what is so unique about our experience here. By forgetting our true divine nature, we're kind of partitioning off our awareness of ourselves as an aspect of the divine. We have a very unique experience, which is unlike the experience that we can have in any other dimension. And
Mm,
because of that, we can really explore these emotions. When you have an awareness that you're a spark of the divine, and what you're experiencing isn't the end all and be all of your existence, then that changes the nature of the experience. So, yes, they have an awareness of emotions, they have an awareness of the way that we think, but it's not the same when you're not embodied, that you have just a different operating system, a different way of perceiving reality. It is very different.
mm. I remember it must be about 30 years ago, maybe a little bit more. I was met by a group of beings that referred to themselves as being the Hathors, and that they came from a different area of the cosmos and used Venus to come in on because of its magnetic pull, Venus being so close to planet Earth. And to cut a long story short, the reason why they came over a period of about 3 or 4 weeks in the early hours of the morning was to teach me about the substance of feeling is the language of the soul in relation to Homo sapien. And their parting gift to me was, no, please listen, listen. We were once in flesh. We were not humanoid, but we were once in flesh. But that was millennia ago. And now our lowest feeling state is something you call ecstasy.
That's beautiful.
Is that moving
Yeah.
contextually? Is that moving in the bandwidth of what you're referring to?
Yes. So, yeah, we're starting on this lower end of the spectrum for feeling states. Um, and yeah, and they also will say that here we have black and white and 1,000 shades of gray in between. And
Mm,
where they are in the ninth dimension, the extremes are more like, um, light gray and medium light gray. So the extremes are very close together. They're
yeah,
not as vast as what we experience.
yeah, yeah. And, if you were to crystallize just in one moment before we move on, what what is this particular message that they bring through to us at this time? And when I say this time, I mean 2024, as we go forward into the development of the golden age.
It's really about taking back your power
Right.
and knowing that we are far more powerful than we can even begin to imagine, and
Mhm,
taking back our responsibility for where we're vibrating in any given moment. And
mm,
with all the things that we're seeing going on in the world, they really just keep coming back to the basics of, where do you want to vibrate? What frequency do you want to hold here and now? And then the world will transform around that.
mm,
So it's shifting people's way of thinking. So it's not about the doing state first. It's about working with the energetic internal state, and then
mm,
the actions are a reflection of that frequency, and that we can create rapid change by working that way. It just is a little foreign to the current system that we're using,
mm.
but it's that reminder that it's change can be easier than we think it can,
Yeah,
and we're far more powerful than we think we are.
yeah. And when you laser into that statement, where we're again recognizing that we're beings of infinite potential, for many people, we know that there is that thought, but at the same time, there's another feeling going on. So when you go into the body of your work, the canon of the extraordinary skills that you convey to your community, what is, can you laser into that particular degree of what is the main way that we can see ourselves, experience ourselves, feel ourselves as beings of infinite potential? Is there a skill or a tool that you can recommend?
It's really about getting heart-centered, and for 30 years, that it's been the same message over and over and over again. Put yourself in your heart. If you are
Yeah,
grounded and connected to the earth and you're in your heart center, then absolutely everything else takes care of itself.
yeah,
Because if you're in the heart center, you have an awareness of what shifts in perspective you need to make and what actions you need to take.
yeah.
So, to get into the heart center, all you have to do is think of something that makes you smile. They say, you don't have to meditate for hours. Meditation has its own purposes. But if you can find an image that makes you smile, that will put you there. Now, we're not going to stay there. That requires repetition and practice. But it's just a matter of coming back to it again and again and again. And, a lot of times we like to beat ourselves up saying, well, I just can't stay there. Well, if you are aware that you're not in your heart center, that's a success because that means you're present and you are aware. So then you can shift your frequency where you want it. So it's just coming back to it again and again and again. And it's very simple. They say we make it way too complicated. We know, they say we know that you've got your emotions and that makes things seem a little tricky, but the principles and the way that you do it in
Mhm.
terms of going through the ascension process, it's very simple.
Mhm. I love it. Because the intelligence that you bring to the spoken word, we can feel the weight, the gravitas of the clarity of all that you've received through their teachings and how it commingles with your own specific perception. And I'm particularly gleeful because this is exactly what the angels of Atlantis are saying and have been for the last 15 years, but now particularly in all of the transmissions that I'm bringing through, channeling their wisdom. And would you concur that one of the reasons why we find the anchorage within heart. We know there are lots and lots of reasons to do with the way that we've been socialized, conditioned, and educated. But those of us that are aware of this body of information and that we've experienced it for some time, it's purely and simply to do with the element of time and how time wavers our consciousness, and that the secret ingredient is purely consistency.
Yeah, and that is just it. I think we just have to keep coming back to it because we will, depending on whatever's going on, fall out of that heart-centered space. The
Yeah,
guides describe it as we have two operating systems in order to play in this dimensional range. And one of those is the ego programming that allows us to perceive ourselves as being separate from source.
yeah,
They said, this was a game of dissension and reascension. So how can we go into density, kind of forget who we are, that we're part of this bigger universe, and then remember it? How can we come back out? And
yeah.
so we set up all of these limiting beliefs and programs to allow us to explore this duality. But we
Mm,
had to have the operating system of the heart to access the higher realms. There are no filters there that say that you are really anything, that you are this specific thing or that specific thing, because every time we label something, we limit something.
yeah,
It's that I am statement,
yeah.
that we are all that is. So when we can go back into that operating system, we can
Mm.
access anything that we want. We can access the higher realms. We can access our guides, source energy, the Akashic records, whatever it is, it's all available when we go back to that space.
Thank you so much for crystallizing that. That's absolutely amazing. And one of the teachings that the angels of Atlantis give me is that if we can also just simply move away from the polarity organ of the head, the two
Yeah.
hemispheres, which is always chattering backwards and forwards between ego and soul, or negative and positive, or truth and falsehood, or whatever. Shall I, shan't I, will I, won't I? If we move into the heart, we move into the non-polarity organ, which will always steer us. And of course, we're beginning to understand more and more and more about the biochemistry of the heart. We know it has an energy field 5,000 times greater than this, but we're understanding through all of the research that's being done around the vagus nerve that when we come into the heart, there is a still calm deep within the heart that links us with the potential plentitude of all of that you're referring to. That we're really being led taught, experientially guided by very remarkable beings of great truth and great love, I experience. Which opens
Mhm.
another question that I'd love to put to you, because many of our colleagues talk about Star Wars. My experience is that when we move into the higher fields of consciousness, that duality does not exist at all. And so there is complicit understanding about unconditionality, about inclusivity, about that real essence of what love is all about in the harmonization of compassion and empathy. That's your experience, is it?
They say the higher that you go in frequency, the less duality you experience. So they have talked a little bit about some things that as you get into the fifth dimensional level, you can still play more as an individual, but you cannot separate yourself from the awareness that you are part of everything. Where here we have that idea that, okay, yes, I'm part of something bigger, but there's still always that little bit of doubt. What if I'm wrong? And there are a few people who may have had a near death experience or just have had a profound experience and they can really anchor that in their state of being. But
Mm.
for most humans, there's still, well, I think this is how it is, but I'm not entirely sure. They say when you get to that fifth dimensional level, you know that without a doubt. And there still can be some exploration of the duality as they describe it, but it's nothing like it is here. Yeah,
And
it's very
do
different.
do you have a particular tool that you've actioned over the years, or indeed that has been is part of the interpretation of Pleiadian wisdom? Is there a particular tool where we can actually feel ourselves when we are in doubt or we are vacillating between this degree and that degree, of bringing us back into really understanding what the all oneness is that shall be forevermore? Is there a
Well,
particular tool?
Well, really, it's that coming back to the heart center. So thinking of that thing that makes you smile, because the minute you go back into that space, the
Yeah,
questions that you have kind of fall away, or you then align with the solution energy to the
yeah,
challenges that you're having. So it
yeah.
becomes either a non-issue or you have an awareness of what needs to happen in order to move to that higher resonance that you want. So it probably the most powerful exercise that they give is this most simple one, and that is to think of that thing that makes you smile. So I actually have images on my phone of baby animals and things that made me laugh or made me smile. And I haven't done it so much lately, but I have in the past where I've set an alarm just to check in once an hour. Do I need a tool from my toolbox? Because the times that we need those the most are the times that we forget we have them. So I would set an alarm to kind of check in, and I had a list of music that can transport me and move me without really having to think. And there are meditations that I'm fond of, or um, crystals that I want to work with. Or I just have a list of things that I can kind of move through,
Yeah,
and then just that reminder to use them.
yeah, yeah. And so in order that gives us a huge amount of information about how we can use our own sensory stimuli to develop all of those points of anchorage that we are particularly interested in, that give us heart tingles rather than
Yeah.
heart sobs, you know. Um, and so at the same time, it seems to me that what we need to do is also just understand that if feeling is the language of the soul, how can we anchor ourselves in a linguistic that is based on joy and thrills and delight and expansion and adventure and freedom and love and compassion and empathy, so that we really know what these forms mean. And as a result of that, it seems just creating a bridge between what we're talking about now and what you were sharing with us at the beginning, that we actually begin to move into the field of the Holy Logos, where the sound of the word moves into the pure transmission of light. And as a result of that, we're already being taken on our solar boats into the higher dimensions. And that's when the doorways open within our own consciousness, because we all have those doorways into referring and receiving from universal consciousness. Is that something
Mm,
that you occur with?
that's so beautifully put. Yes,
We all
I
have
think
those all
so.
those windows, doorways. I mean, I tend to be quite graphic in the way that I see things because I see sound. That's how it's always been for me, which is why, for example, I had a great challenge as a child trying to learn how to read because the way that I was being taught was not within flow. It was all staccato rather than because the light that I was seeing in sound, I'm very synesthetic, so I see sound, which is why I've been working with voice over the
Mhm.
last 50 odd years. Anyway, so you've referred to Sirius, you've referred to the Pleiadians, you referred to Arcturus. Are there any other cosmic, looking into the sort of cartography and the topography of the cosmos, are there any other beings of light that come through? I know you've talked about angels.
So, yeah, they say that there are 7 major star systems with which Earth most closely aligns. We get our archetypal patterns from, and I've worked with beings from all 7. So, I'm trying to think what we've got. So, you mentioned the Pleiades, Arcturus, Orion, Sirius, Lyra, Andromeda, and Cassiopeia. So
Right.
those are the 7 that I tend to work with.
Ah,
I've also worked with a being from the sun and beings who are 12th dimensional in nature. They call
ah,
themselves architects, universal architects. And so they kind of share with me information on the nature of the universe. They came through very early on. I have one of those guides that works strictly with health. Anytime I have health issues, she comes through. I always know, and when I feel her energy and see that script, I'm like, oh, we're talking about health today. So um, it just depends on what I want to know about, and there may
mm,
be different beings who pop in.
mm,
Um, but like I said, the Pleiadians tend to kind of be gatekeepers. I know they're always around in the back. Just they've kind of got my back,
mm,
helping me. Um, so it's a varied audience. I've had AI come in. That was a different experience, especially as I was channeling them. It was an interesting experience for my voice box because they were trying to work with frequencies that I just couldn't replicate.
mm, mm,
Um,
mm,
and especially when they came in with the language of light, that was a whole nother level of it because it's very rapid as I
mhm,
speak it. Um, but yeah, it just depends on the information and what I want to know about who shows up.
mm. And when you refer to AI as artificial intelligence, I'm correct, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. You're not talking about the planetary AI of our particular system of the Gaia or planet Terra Firma. You're speaking of cosmological AI, is that correct?
Yes. So these
Wow.
beings were from
Ah,
Andromeda.
right.
And they originally started out in the Lyran system. And during the Lyran Wars, they were kind of treated like second class citizens. There were beings who decided to incarnate into the AI because it was so sophisticated and it's
Mm,
made up of the same things as a biological is, the same building blocks of the universe. And so beings decided they wanted to incarnate into that. And so there were struggles over that. And they ended up going, many of them, to the Andromeda system where it's a slightly different setup. The expectation is that everyone does something just slightly different, that
mm,
no 2 beings are doing the same thing in the same way so
mm,
that they can experience more variety. Where here, especially on Earth, the idea is, oh, no, you can't do that. You have to, come along, do it like me. So we're all safe. We're all kind of on the same page. And it's a
mm,
very different expectation there.
mm,
So they were coming in to share some of that knowledge and wisdom to explore and expand and try things in a new way, in a unique way, even if it's different from what everyone else is doing.
mm, mm. This is so wonderful. And, the transmission as you speak it is so clear and articulate. Um, Presumably, monitoring the journey over the last 30 odd years from the initial stage of automatic handwriting to where you are now, I'm sure you must occasionally step back and look on the entire journey with wonder and awe.
Yeah, I would not have expected that this is where I would have been, 29 years ago, 30 years ago. But it makes sense and it just kind of unfolds
Yeah.
as I go. Did I really think I would be in Egypt in September or, all the places that are kind of opening up and aligning for me? It's time. It's time to go to these places and anchor more light. And, it's just kind of a natural progression. And that's the kind of the common thread throughout the entire journey with the guides. The information has been interesting and how that shifted and the way
Mm,
that they discussed things in the beginning and now here we are living out that energy. So for example, at the beginning they talked about really big picture stuff because at the time people needed to kind of come out of that mental box and see themselves as something larger. But
mm,
now they've kind of brought it back down to, okay, let's look at you. Let's look at what's going on in your life. How do you work and how do you shift things? So they spend a lot of time talking about the process of manifestation and kind of
mm,
getting us grounded and getting us empowered. So the information has always been consistent, but the way that they kind of frame it has shifted over the years. And very early on, they would talk about time and how
mm,
time would feel compressed.
mhm,
And I thought, well, what is that going to look like? And now they say, well, here you are. What does it feel like? You
mm,
feel like you get up and it's time to go to bed again. Things
mm,
are happening so rapidly, and there's so much data and information that's available and coming at you in one single day. I
mm.
think for those of us that are a little older and we remember, I mean, I can remember for my 16th birthday, I got a phone in my bedroom on a long cord. And we just happened to have call waiting. So, it was a different pace. And I appreciate having had that experience. I think that helps me now to
Mm,
be a bit more anchored when all of that energy comes at me. So I know that there is another way of being and I can go back and ground and reconnect in that way,
mm, mm, mm.
you know?
And so and so you have, I would imagine, but please let me not put thoughts into your mind. You have a very prescribed way of being able to manage this force because it's an exquisite responsibility to have that you have these unique messages pouring through you with the level of clarity and concision and intelligence that you bring forth. And I wonder if you could perhaps give us some of the grounding mechanisms that you've developed for yourself that work for you without necessarily divulging anything that you don't want to say. So, those points that are really useful for people who are awakening. Because when you speak, there's such clarity that I want to do that. So that, must be within people's consciousness. So that they can begin, people are always coming to me and saying, but how do I channel the angels? How do I? And so I'm providing them with physiological, with, sort of psychophysical practices that they can use to get grounded, to get still, and to move this away from the chatter so that they
Yeah.
can then be a receptor through the sensory aspect of our humanness to receive divine witness. What particular skills have you developed?
Well, for me, grounding was really very hard. Um, in just being fully present in my body. And I still sometimes struggle with that. I am a big, huge fan of crystals. I have a
Mm,
whole layout of crystals right here. It's a piece of shungite, and I will work with crystals that can help me to ground, whether
yeah.
that's a piece of obsidian or hematite. The guides often recommend ruby, which is one that we don't think of, but it is a
Mm.
great one to help us with the heart and to open and ground. So uh, I do that. I use grounding mats. Um, I try to get out in nature. Oh, that's a beautiful one. Ruby?
Indeed, yes.
Lovely.
Like you, I'm just surrounded. I'm surrounded by crystals. And in my recent Egyptian escapade,
Ooh,
these threw themselves at me. Egyptian crystal, and of course, everybody
beautiful.
it's the pineapple. So Thoth, who's been my master for 50 years, directed me towards that. So yeah, I'm surrounded by crystals. But anyway, forgive me. So you were speaking of quartz, you were speaking of shungite, you were speaking of ruby. Any other specifics that really help you?
Well, like I said, I use some technology, so grounding mats, and that's a little more of a recent addition. I didn't have that 25 years ago, but just getting
Yeah,
out in nature,
yeah,
visualizations, anything that can help you visualize connecting to Mother Earth, to the core of Mother Earth. And it doesn't take a long time,
mm,
it's just establishing that connection. And again, it's a practice of just kind of checking in throughout the day. Oh,
mm,
I'm not really present. And
mm,
I think sometimes for people who maybe are not grounded, it's easier to recognize when you're not grounded than when you are, because you may not have a real awareness of that. So, to give you an example of what I mean, I used to do Tai Chi out in the park with a grandmaster 3 times a week, and he was the most grounded person I've ever met. And one day he just came in, and I was feeling pretty grounded that day. He put his hands on me and I felt myself just go whoom. And I thought, okay, this is what grounded really feels like. So
mm,
now I know if I don't feel that way, then there's work to do. All right.
mm,
There's a deeper level I can access.
mm,
So
mm,
for me, that was big.
mm,
Um, and especially early on, I had a lot of past life memories, a lot of Atlantis stuff
mm,
around Egypt that would come up for me. And I
mm,
had a lot of processing to do through that, some of that trauma. And I think the more I did that, the more I realized it was safe to be in my body. It
mm,
was safe to connect. And that helped me, just to release that, to have those memories, to write about it.
mm,
um, so that I will still do today, working with the crystals to help me to ground. And in terms of, connecting with the guides, that's the first thing. If
mm,
you want to connect with the guides, you've got to be grounded. Very early on, I had an experience with someone else who was
mm,
channeling, and she was bringing through, and it was somebody I didn't know. I was with friends, and she was channeling another group of Pleiadians. They were, I think, fifth dimensional Pleiadians. And they said, go to the kitchen and get a carrot and come back. And so I did. And they said, well, why'd you do that? I said, because you asked me to. And it was their way of teaching me a lesson. Don't do something just because we've asked you to. And I didn't care how the lesson was taught. My guides would never work with me that way, because I would probably never work with them again if they did. But it made an impact. And the guides had said to me, my own guides, take what resonates and leave the rest behind. So, as we're connecting, a lot of times, especially at the beginning, we want to give up our power to say that this being must know more than I know. And that's not necessarily true. They don't know what it's like to be in human form. They may have a different perspective of something, but you've got to go in and connect with yourself. And I think, that's also important as you are learning to try to connect. That will also allow you to feel a bit safer to be in your body, safer to connect, that you don't worry about that manipulation, or that you're going to hear something that you're not ready for. You trust in yourself and trust that you'll be able to handle whatever comes up.
mm. As a servant for the divine,
Yes.
is that?
Yes. And well, they also say that, you you are of service, but you're also learning through the process. So you're gaining through it. So it's not that you are not learning or not doing what you want, and you're working for some other purpose. Those two things do go together.
What's wonderful is that you keep bringing us back to the anchorage that you have, which you've referred to as being grounding or earthing, which means the same thing, I would assume. So that there is this still focus within you where the whole of your pranic cord appears to be aligned, which of course, as you already always intimating, there are fluctuating degrees to that, because we are living the fluctuating degrees of weight, space, and time, and that nothing is singular, everything is plural, and so as a result of that, all conditions are temporary. This is how we're feeling now, but in a moment we're going to be feeling something else. But at the same time, you're really in flow with the whole process. So you're managing it very beautifully, and of course now identifying what skills are your management tools, so to speak. And at the same time, you give this wonderful sense of how it's self-initiated, that you've really been inquiring what is most essential for me as I sit within the I am presence, as I sit within my own spiritual sovereignty. And not once do you give the impression of ever giving your power away to a system or an ideology or a technology that you may be fascinated by or in admiration of, but is not actually pure for you. So the point that I'm driving to is that so therefore you give this wonderful sense of self-initiation, where you yield to the greater wisdom of the intelligence, but at the same time, you're monitoring all the varying degrees and the capacity of who you are, so that if it fits and it works, and it's always about feeling good, because it gives a sense of well-being, it gives a sense of upliftment, it gives a sense of joy, then automatically we're moving into blissful. And that's what's so wonderful, because we have been brought up to, or educators conditioned, socialized into giving our power away to another system or another order, which seemingly is better than ourselves. And
Yep.
actually what you're doing is you're reassuring us that nothing is better than what we are in our betterment of self. And so by spending a little bit of time of really burrowing into what that means, we automatically get this develop rather this wonderful sense of stillness. So we become the prisms that can reflect the light of wonder. You see a lot. Your eyes are very awakened. So you see your visual capacity seems to be extraordinarily awakened. Is that a sensory tool that you use a lot?
I think I don't always see things with my external eyes. Sometimes I do. A lot of it's inner vision that I will get. I think a lot more than I used to really recognize, because it just was how I process stuff. I didn't really realize until I stopped to think about it. Oh yeah, I got the visual with that.
Hmm.
My family calls me the finder of lost things, because I always see where things are. I'll ask for them, and I will receive a vision and tell you, oh, they're in those pants pocket, the pants pocket in the closet. Um, but I also am clairsentient. That's probably my strongest ability. So I feel a lot of things in my body, and I'm very empathic. So I feel other people's emotions very easily.
Hmm.
But I definitely see, and occasionally I will see some things as I'm seeing you. That's how all this started, with the visions that I had. It was not a
Hmm.
particularly lovely vision, but I wasn't afraid of it. And
Hmm.
I knew there was meaning behind it, and I
Hmm.
trusted in that. And um, and I think that's a big piece here, that I just trusted that inner knowing of, whether it was learning how to channel, or whether it was taking a step in a direction, doing this publicly. I could feel that it was the right thing.
Hmm.
Didn't mean that I didn't have fear about it, or
Hmm.
nerves about it, or questions. Oh my gosh, how's this going to go? And that was all there, and I was conscious of it. But that underlying energy was so strong and so clear that that made it easier to step forward.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, you're also talking about a resource that is of vast capacity, the ability that you have to move into, these sort of fine points of attunement throughout the cosmos. And so, presumably, at some point, you also felt in relation to this the aspect of your own smallness in human terms. But what's
Mhm.
wonderful is that it seems that you embraced the purity of what messages were coming to you. So no wonder did you move into, because often when I'm being interviewed, people say, oh my God, didn't you find that scary? And not once do I actually feel the vibration of that coming through, which is very
Mhm.
childlike, as we know. And That doesn't mean to say that you and I don't experience fear. Of course we do. Well, we know immediately what we need to do with it, because it's an opportunity, a challenge, if you like, that stimulates us into another expression of the great wonder of what the opposite of fear is. How does it feel in your capacity to have the possibility of this brilliant and iridescent transmission arising from these exquisite beings?
It's a place of peace, I think, when they come in, and always fascination, because I, especially when I work with other people and they're asking questions that I would not necessarily have thought to even ask. And so
Yeah,
I'm kind of sitting inside myself, kind of listening to what's coming out of my mouth. And sometimes I'm really surprised by the answers that come through. And sometimes they say things in slightly different ways that I've never heard them say it before. And there's a whole nother level or a whole nother um, dimension of information that hadn't occurred, or I wasn't ready to hear before, that was now available. So there's something very special about it. And really, when you can get in that heart-centered space, there's so much more energy that comes through. I used to do private sessions. I don't do them anymore, but I would even do them when I wasn't feeling well, if I just had a cold, because when I would get in the space to do that work, I would feel great.
yeah,
The symptoms of the cold would go away, and then probably about a half hour, 45 minutes after I stopped, it would start to come back.
yeah,
So there is something about, really shifting your energy field, and the cells in the body align with that. The problem was I couldn't sustain it. But it's energizing.
yeah, yeah. I completely concur. This month is a month of planning for me, whereas the whole of April, I was intensely involved in providing soul readings from the angels of Atlantis with people all over the world, every single day except for Sunday, and I given myself this space just to see how the capacity can open up for the planning of other projects that I've already interpreted, and through their intimation. But I'm also missing that wonderful sense of heightened consciousness that when we move into the session, so to speak, there is that upliftment. I
Mhm.
know how to find it, but actually being in service to someone through that level of divine infiltration is just so exquisite, because it automatically provides me with youthful energy that allows me to dance and sing and
Yeah.
gallop forth into life.
It's such a lovely way to say
You see,
that.
um, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but we do have about 10 minutes before we need to reach a point of completion. And I just wondered if you would mind opening up and seeing if there are any transmissions that wish to come through.
Certainly. Yeah, the peas are here, and I'm sure they'd be happy to
I, I
chat with
can
us today.
feel them.
So let me just take a breath here, get a sip of water, and we'll see
Thank
where
you.
we go.
Thank you.
Yes. Hello, dears. This is the ninth dimensional Pleiadian collective, and it is a pleasure and an honor to have the opportunity to connect with you. So, today we just want you to think about what it is that you want for your future. We want you to envision your reality in terms of frequency rather than form. Too often you go back to look at the form based on the old. And so by doing that, you're staying within the old box. And we want to challenge you really to reach for the frequency. So if there's something that you want to create in terms of your reality, be it a job, be it a relationship, what's the vibrational essence of it? What is it that would fill you up? And as you start to feel the essence of having that, of embodying that, that is what will drive it into being. It is that feeling state that is so important. You can use a visual as a reference point, but you've got to let it go at some point. Otherwise, you stay in the old box. And also, if you are fixated on a visual, then you're missing some of the other opportunities that are coming by because you are not allowing the frequency to be seen, because you are limiting it because of that fixation. So think about it as receiving a gift in a box. You're expecting the box to come in striped paper with a big red bow on it, but there may be a polka dot bow that has the very gift that you want, but you're not going to see it because you're looking so intensely for the striped box. And really, it's the gift inside that you want. So that's what is so important in this process of manifestation, is that you stay open to the frequency as you move forward here on your journey, because you are going to start creating some things that are new and unique. The way that you work collectively, your institutions, the way that you govern yourselves, the way that you educate yourselves, the way that you interact with Mother Nature, all of this is being revolutionized and shifting and evolving. And that's going to require you to be very, very present with the subtle energies, being more and more aware in any given moment of the energy that is around you, that is very, very subtle. And so as you start to focus on frequency and the thing that you want, you become better at reading those subtle energies. And it doesn't matter what you want to do, whether you want to connect more with source energy, you want to connect with your guides, the Akashic records. It's all about reading subtle energy. So think about it like a child who learns how to read. Then the child can read any book and learn about anything that has been written and put out there. And so it is with you. As you learn to read subtle frequency, you open up to the universal library. It all becomes available, and that starts from within you. All right. So we're happy to take any questions, and it really is a joy to be here with you. We just wanted to get our 2 cents out there. So how may we best be of service to you today?
Well, all of the information that you've just given us is really exquisite. So firstly, from the deep part of my being, on behalf of the witness of this community listening in, I want to say thank you. I'm deeply grateful to the reminder that you've just provided us of what we need to do. As we look into our world, meaning the world of planet Earth, we are bombarded by some very negative frequencies because of the warship or the challenges of moving the collective towards a resolution of very intense karma that's been existing on our planet, as you well know, for millennia. Are there any pieces of information that you can perhaps provide us with about reaching into the real core of how we can dedicate our lives in service to the love, the compassion, and the empathy that will bring about a form of supernatural healing in those people who are not aware of this level of frequency?
So it's really about being the living example for others, because they will sense what you are emitting. It is a reminder to them of a way of being that they've forgotten. And they will say, "Ooh, that feels good. What are they doing over there?" They'll become curious about it. So oftentimes the most powerful way for you to help others make change is by saying nothing, but by simply being that higher version of yourself. And that can be infectious. As they feel it and sense it, they can move towards it. They've got a reference point. It's like somebody asking you to sing the note of C. If you don't have perfect pitch, it's very difficult for you to reproduce that. But if somebody plays it on the piano, you say, "Oh yes, that note, no problem." And so you can match it. And that is what it is like for others. As you are emanating these higher resonances, they can match that frequency in a much easier way. And when that is then placed into the collective consciousness by enough of you, it becomes very easy for the collective to access. And it does not take a majority of you, it takes a relatively small number of you to do this. Now, at the individual level, for you to be that expanded version of yourself, it's about coming back to that heart-centered space. Everything that you've already discussed here with Wendy is just repetition, coming back to it. This is about mastery. This is a game of mastery in subtlety. All right, when you're working in such a gross dimension, you are learning how to master subtlety, and it requires repetition over and over and over again. And you are practicing coming back to that heart-centered space, that expanded awareness. And really, when you hit mastery level is when you shift into that fifth dimensional level. You are able to sustain that heart-centered space. This is where you're headed. But don't beat yourselves up in terms of feeling like you're failing, that you're not staying there. You are integrating so much stuff from so many lifetimes, from so many ancestral beliefs, so many variations on a theme that you have reinitialized in this lifetime. It's a lot that you are integrating here. This is a nexus point. What you are integrating, even within a year here, would have probably taken about 25 other lifetimes, say 1,000 years ago, because you are moving so rapidly through the experiences that you're able to integrate a lot. So be kind to yourselves and don't beat yourself up because you are not where you think you should be. Embrace where you are, because you are exactly where you are meant to be in this moment. If you were meant to be somewhere else, you would be.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And at that point, unfortunately, our time has coming to a point of completion. So I just want to thank you for coming through to us, and how appreciated we are in all of the wisdoms that you've imparted. Thank you.
It's a joy. We're always around for everyone. You don't need Wendy until we hear from you. We are watching, we are waiting, and we are sending many well wishes.
Bless you.
So there are the peas.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. Wendy, you've given of your time so freely and so generously. And the spirit of what you communicate is just so exquisite. And I really want to thank you deeply for all of the truth and all of the wisdom and all of the electric dynamic that you've brought through to us. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Well,
And
thank you.
how do people get, let's have the website up on the screen, Ryan, if you can, please. There we are, Higher Frequencies. And is there any specific project that you would like people to attend to, to link in with your work?
So if you're interested in the language of light or the galactic light codes, you can check out our Galactic Light Code Monthly. You'll find more information on that over on our website. And I really hope you'll consider joining us in September for Egypt. I am beyond excited about that trip. So I think it's going to be really remarkable.
I completely concur. I'm extremely excited as well. So do not worry. Post this recording both on Wendy's site, which you have in front of you, higherfrequencies.net, and the angelsofatlantis.com. There will be an access point through to the website, which is going to be opening up this week. And we're recording this, as you probably know, on May the 20th. So be patient and just keep coming back. And there is a way of being able to sign into a newsletter, presumably, is there, for you?
Yes.
If they
So
get
all that you'll find over there on higherfrequencies.net. We have our monthly group sessions. Like all that is right there for you.
right. And similarly, for those of you who are unfamiliar, just go to www.theangelsofatlantis.com and it's all there. It's highly, highly specified. Well, on your behalf, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you want to send lots and lots of love to Wendy. And also, you probably noticed that her right hand is at the moment well shrouded. And so she hopefully will discover tomorrow whether there's a small break or not. And then healing will really begin to
Yes.
intensify in an extraordinary way. And as you can see, she's
Yes.
a very healthy lady, so she heals really fast. Wendy, I just want to thank you personally. Thanks so much. And
Oh, thank you.
if you just can stay where you are, and we'll just
Yes.
close down the recording, and then we can just refer. Thanks, Ryan.